first question is, what changes in storyline did you apply on this God of War? I know you're going back to the beginning, but how was that journey taking back, working with the other titles in terms of story?
So going back to the beginning means a lot of different things based on our other titles, right? You look at God of War 1 or God of War 2 or God of War 3, they all allude to things in Kratos' past. And maybe you haven't experienced that. And God of War Ascension is a specific story that Todd, Marianne, and the team wanted to tell. That is basically going to take you to tell a story about Kratos that allow you to empathize with him. When you complete the game, you will understand why he was cursing the gods at the beginning of God of War 1. You will understand why he was talking about his nightmares and his visions that he was having. He was like, why would you do this to me? You will understand that. And I think that this story is important to tell because it shows a different side of Kratos that we've never seen before.
Will that storytelling, starting in the beginning, will probably draw players that accompany the God of War series, but also new players to just get into the whole saga? Was that one of your goals, just to bring new players to this world that is God of War?
You know, honestly, it wasn't when we were talking about the story that we wanted to tell. It actually wasn't one of our goals. We weren't like, oh, here's what we want to do. We want to tell this story because we want to get a lot of new players. It wasn't until we actually developed it and we started talking to people that we realized that, you know what, this is actually the beginning. And now if you've never played it, you can play it from the beginning. And you can basically experience all the games now without missing a beat. And even if you start halfway through, you can go back to the beginning, start at God of War Ascension, and you'll learn the entire tale of Kratos, why he turned into the man that he was, and why he ended up the way he did in God of War 3.
Talking now about the combat, which is the heart and soul of God of War, except for storytelling. What new features does this God of War have that the others didn't?
So combat is going to offer a wide variety of changes. We start with the rage system. Jason's talked about the rage system a lot. And I think the idea behind the rage system, I like to be a little bit more simplistic about it because I'm simple-minded. For me, the rage system it's a game. It's always this game that you're playing to try to build as high combo as you can, not get hit by enemies, because if you can keep the rage up, you can basically obliterate your enemies a little bit faster. Or you're having, like, you've got some big creature there that's really going to take you out, so what you can do is you can spend all that rage in one place. When you combine that with the elements, you have a whole different kind of array of attacks that he's never had before. And that's one change. I mean, before we had like the Titan meter. And the Titan meter was something that built up automatically. If you got hit, it didn't really matter and you would spend it. But the rage system is one of those things that's either going to use it or you use it or you lose it. So it's one of those things that rewards gameplay, it rewards you playing well. So that's a big change to the combat. The other is the world weapon system. And the world weapon system is exciting because that kind of alludes to Kratos' human side. It's more of his return to his Spartan roots. And what that means is that Kratos doesn't need any mythical weapons in order to become more powerful. He's already got the blades. So if you take that world weapon and you remove a sword from a satyr, or you knock the shield out of his hands, that changes up the combos that you can perform as a player. So you might go into an arena, you might have a spear or javelin or something like that, and you might use the javelin a couple times, and then realize this is really effective, but these enemies are all mobbing me, and this javelin only works really good range. So they're all maybe wielding clubs. So you can knock the clubs out of their hand, discard the javelin discard does this crazy rain of javelins from the sky, takes out a couple of enemies, pick up a club that you knocked out of one of their hands, and now change your combos that you're doing where you're basically like knocking them out of, you hit home runs with them one step of the way, every step of the way in the fight. And what that does is it allows you to customize kind of how you do your fighting. So that maybe you get into a particular fight and you say, I had this particular weapon one time, and then when you're talking to me and you're talking about that same fight, I had a different world weapon when we fought. And we never really had that before. We never really had, you were able to choose what kind of thing you were carrying around with me, and I was able to choose a different thing that was carrying around with me. Maybe I like the club more, maybe you like the sword more. So that's it. And then the other thing I would say is we've improved accessibility. tremendous amount by making the grapple tether a big part of Kratos' combos. I mentioned that the grapple tether is one of those things that allows you to kind of weaponize creatures, but it's also one of those things that it becomes the de facto kind of interaction button. Everything in the world is interacted off of the R1 grapple tether. So it's like when you go and do the Die Hard move where he grapples into the wall and he bashes against it, that's R1. When you go off of a grapple and you're swinging around the world, that's R1. When you get a gold halo over an enemy's head because he's stunned, that's going to be R1. You can be able to get to it from a different range. And the nice thing about that is it's all unified in one spot, so it's accessible for every player. You don't have to know the right button to do these cool things. Instead, the one button will get you to it quickly. You don't have to be right next to him. It has a range. So that's a huge improvement to the game. And then my favorite one that I love to bring up that Jason McDonald's so modest about, but I'm like dead serious. It makes a huge improvement. Go play God of War 3, knock an enemy up into the air, and swing your blades. And the blades will go cut underneath them, and you won't even hit them. And Jason, one of the things that he did is he just made the blades track up in the air. And it makes a huge difference when you're trying to keep your combos up, and you're trying to build your rage meter. That when you knock a guy up in the air, if you don't want to go up in the air and do moves with him, you can still hit him from the ground and hit him in the air. Or if you've got harpies flying around, you can hit the harpies flying around in the air. It makes a massive difference.
Multiplayer, it's a new feature on God of War Ascension. What will bring people to play that multiplayer? What is the main component that makes God of War multiplayer so attractive to players? Again, new players and old players of the series.
Sure. So one of my favorite things about the multiplayer is that if you're a fan of the series, if you're not a fan of the series, but for fans of the series, you get to create your champion. And you get to bring him into the world that Kratos lives in and everyone knows. And that's the first time ever. Before, you've always played something that we designed for you in Kratos, and you've been able to unlock and progress through the story. In this game, you get to create a guy, and you need to customize him how you see fit. What armor he's going to wear, whether he's going to be really resistant, whether he's going to be really powerful, what god that he aligns himself to. Maybe you start with one god too, and you realize, you know what, I like this god, but everybody else is kind of aligned to this god, and you switch your allegiances. It's very Greek, you know, like, I like you, Zeus, but I like Ares, so I want to go with Ares now, you know? And you're allowed to make those choices as a player to create your champion. And I think that is really compelling. And if you look at that as one side of it, where you're able to choose the items that you use, you're able to choose the weapon you like to wield, maybe you're a spear guy, maybe I'm a hammer guy, you're like Zeus and I like Ares. Well, we can play together. We can play against each other. That's really, that's pretty awesome. It's not just one, it's both. And then the last thing is that the guys that sit in the work on multiplayer, on the design group, they spend a lot of time making each one of our arenas and making each one of them very memorable. So we only show you two. And the two that we've shown, like, the fans and let them play, and we got feedback from them, and they're awesome, is the desert, and it has a giant Titan-sized house in it, and that you can execute, and that's a wow moment. You gotta watch out for them because they'll smash you if you're trying to capture one of the flags, or capture one of the altars and take care of the gods. And then you play another arena, which is familiar to people who play God of War 3, because you're in Hercules' arena, and Hercules jumps down and he interacts with you while you're just trying to stay alive in a match of the champions. So those are two different modes. We've got capture the flag, we've got team favorite of the gods, we've got match of the champions. We've got another mode that we haven't revealed yet that's going to get revealed on March 13th. And you have these two maps that we've shown so far, but there's 6 other maps, and every one of them has something very memorable about it. And maybe it will be some fan service in some of them, and maybe it will be some ones that you've never seen before. And they'll all have that kind of God of War feel, heart and soul. The controls feel exactly the same, buttery smooth combat, and just epic and brutal.
To finish, God of War has always been for the game's massive scale in terms of everything, combat, story, environment. Is this the best God of War yet?
I think it's we always kind of set the bar a little bit higher with every project. We always have this legacy that we're always trying to outdo. And I think God of War Ascension, is definitely the grandest project that the studio's ever completed up to this point, and I think the team's really proud and very happy to finally be able to get it out into the players' hands and let them play aside from themselves.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck.